Hello, I'm just taking a minute today to go over the Maine initial teacher certification standards. And I am going to be specifically thinking about and connecting to art education, but this video will be helpful for anyone in a Maine initial teacher certification program who is trying to finish up their portfolio and show evidence of understanding for their artifacts. So, we're going to look at four different standards today and talk about how they differ and how they're the same. The first two that we're pairing together are Standard 1, Learner Development, and Standard 2, Learning Differences. And then we will look at Standard 4, Content Knowledge, and Standard 5, Application of Content Knowledge. So, going back up to the top. Standard number 1, learner development. The teacher understands how learners grow and develop, recognizing that patterns of learning and development vary individually within and across the cognitive, linguistic, social, emotional, and physical areas, and designs and implements developmentally appropriate and challenging learning experiences. Whenever my students are working on developing artifacts, I always suggest to them that they literally copy and paste the content and description and then use that to build off for their description that they're doing of the artifact. The next standard we're looking at is Standard 2, Learning Differences. The teacher uses understanding of individual differences in diverse cultures and communities to ensure inclusive learning environments that enable each learner to meet high standards. So, what are the same and what is different here? Starting with Standard 1, the teacher understands. So, this is the important word to think about here. How learners grow and develop, how to recognize patterns of learning and development, and how they vary individually within and across the cognitive, linguistic, social, emotional, and physical areas. And the teacher understands how to design and implement developmentally appropriate and challenging learning experiences. So, what might that look like? So, the teacher understands how learners grow and develop. Did you take a human development class in the past? Have you drawn upon that knowledge in your teaching practice? How might that look? How to recognize patterns of learning and development and how they vary individually within and across the cognitive, linguistic, social, emotional, and physical areas. So, one thing I'm thinking about here is maybe taking a look at how things might vary with your ELL students, or maybe students that you have that have maybe a cognitive delay. Maybe there are students that you have that are refugees, and maybe different social or emotional things are affecting them. So you're just breaking these things down, trying to connect it back to parts of learning that you have done in your program, and using examples as much as possible, get specific, and really connect it to what you are doing or what you are planning. The last bullet down here says how to design and implement developmentally appropriate and challenging learning experiences. So, how are you thinking about what is developmentally appropriate in your lesson plans? And what do you use to check for that? So, one tool I use often when I am creating K through 12 curriculum is Yardsticks, the book. That's a great text. It breaks things down into ages, and I can think about, okay, well, how could I use this in my teaching practice to make sure that this lesson is developmentally appropriate for the students that I'm working with? You might also look at the Maine learning results or the national standards. So, how are you thinking about how things are developmentally appropriate? Moving on to Standard 2, learning differences. The teacher uses understanding of individual differences in diverse cultures and communities to ensure inclusive learning environments that enable each learner to meet high standards. Again, when you're doing this for your artifact, copy and paste that description and use that as a jumping off point for you to add your personal information for the artifact, backing it up. How are you showing evidence of this particular standard? So going down below, breaking it down, to ensure inclusive learning environments that enable each learner to meet high standards, the teacher uses understanding of individual differences, diverse cultures, and communities. So maybe you wrote a demographics profile for the school that you're working at. That could be evidence of you understanding the community that you are working in. It could also help you explain your understanding of the diverse cultures within your community. So hopefully this is making sense and you're seeing a little bit of some differences from one standard to the other. Just like everything with all of the standards, if you have a great lesson or a great artifact, often you could use it for more than one of the standards. It's really how you are reflecting on it and how you are connecting that is going to allow you to understand where it fits more perfectly. And almost all of these could have very similar examples. You're just differentiating the description a little bit to help you to really articulate your understanding. All right, I am going to move on to the bottom here. So for standard number 4, content knowledge, the teacher understands the central concepts, tools of inquiry, and structures of the disciplines he or she teaches and creates learning experiences that make these aspects of the discipline accessible and meaningful for learners to assure mastery of the content. Breaking that down, the teacher understands and creates learning experiences that make the following aspects of the discipline accessible and meaningful for learners and to assure mastery of the content. I think there should be a side note there that mastery of the content is obviously going to be different for a kindergartner compared to a 12th grader. So if you are teaching drawing to a kindergartner, obviously that mastery of content is going to look very different than your AP art student their last semester of their senior year. With that said, the teacher understands and creates learning experiences. So we're looking down here, central concepts of the discipline. So, what do you know? If you are an art educator, some of these might be the things that you know about drawing or ceramics or photography. So, what are the things in your discipline? One of my students recently was saying that they were working with a mentor teacher who was struggling with working the kiln and they thought the kiln was broken. And they were able to talk that mentor teacher through and setting up the kiln. So that would be showing that mastery of content. That would be a great example of that. Tools of inquiry. What are tools of inquiry, you might ask? So down below, I've added some examples of tools of inquiry. So asking questions, gathering knowledge, listening to experts, considering alternatives, and working together to plan for action. So thinking about that, are there texts that you often refer to or reflect upon? Are there podcasts that you're listening to? Is there a YouTube channel that you watch? So, thinking about all these different tools of inquiry, are you a reflective practitioner? How are you reflecting on your practice? And then, structures of the disciplines. So, I got this little excerpt from the Annenberg Learner, which is learner.org. And how they framed this was the structures of the discipline are the building blocks for organizing the curriculum to engage students in activities and experiences around these core beliefs. These structures also pave the way for transfer of other ideas, subjects, and real life problems inside and outside of school. So, how are you using these structures of the discipline? Moving over to standard 5, application of content. So, content knowledge is talking about your understanding of the content and even perhaps your mastery of the content. Standard 5 is application of the content. The teacher understands how to connect concepts and use differing perspectives to engage learners in critical thinking, creativity, and collaborative problem solving related to authentic, local, and global issues. So, breaking this down in this bottom area, related to authentic, local, and global issues, the teacher understands how to connect concepts and use differing perspectives to engage learners in critical thinking, creativity, collaborative problem solving. So, this might, in an art program, the critical thinking could be maybe done in the brainstorming part of the process. It could have to do with pushing students to develop their concept and helping foster a reflective practitioner in them as well. Engaging in creativity and then collaborative problem solving. This could be perhaps you guys are working on an installation collaboratively and the students are having to problem solve. It could be creating a mural in the cafeteria. It could be trying to gather pieces for a group show and you are having the students work together to critique a larger body of work. So there's tons of different ways that you could apply the content. Um, Going back to content knowledge really quickly, another way that this is sometimes a little bit different for art educators and perhaps museum educators or dance educators or theater educators, anything in the visual and performing arts essentially, is often they have a practice outside of that K through 12 experience. They are professional artists, professional musicians, maybe they act, they dance, so on and so forth. So if you are creating work outside of your school K through 12 experience, sharing some of your content knowledge through your own work is another way to show evidence of your understanding. So I hope that this video was helpful with breaking down the differences between those two different pairings of those four standards. And for my students, please reach out if you have any questions or concerns or any other further differentiation. Hope all is well and good luck.